Our next speaker is Zach Bowen. He's the branch chief of the Ecosystem Dynamics Group with U.S. Geological Survey out of Fort Collins. He's been going to be talking about visualization and decision support tools for the science framework.
Thanks, Gene, for the introduction, and also have to thank Sarah for that really great setup. I noticed she was already apologizing for being the talk between people and lunch, and I think I was described as that other talk between people and lunch, so thanks for that. The title of the talk, Visualization and Decision Support Tools. You've been hearing the word tools a lot, and I'm going to talk into the microphone here. And tools mean a lot of different things. In this case, I'm talking about a web-based application. And even within this set of tools, there are lots and lots of these floating around right now. And some of the colleagues that are here in this room and are in attendance are developing various of these tools. And the point is, they all have a purpose. And this particular tool is building on the work that Gene and a bunch of the other folks in this room and elsewhere have been doing on the science framework. And we're kind of in a sweet spot, really, because right now the technology, sorry, I'm not used to doing this with a microphone. The technology and accessibility through the internet, hardware, software, you can do things you couldn't do 10 or 15 years ago over large geographic areas. And in the case of the R&R work, we're talking about basically the western U.S. So a little bit about what the talk is here. Won't spend a ton of time on the partnerships and background. That's been amply covered by Gene and others today. Some of the objectives and benefits, a little bit on the tool and how it works, and importantly, thinking about making better tools going forward. Because one of the key things that Karen pointed out, several others, is it's not the technology, it's not just the science, it's the people working together that make things happen. And that's especially true in the tech world trying to develop good tools. I'm just guessing this slide looks a little familiar if y'all have been with the program today. It's a variant, but all the content's the same. The point is, we're building on the shoulders of a lot of smart people who have spent careers working out here. And the work has been put together in a format, the science framework, that's pretty user-friendly considering what it's trying to accomplish. There's a lot of information here, and it's an excellent resource as it sits. And what we were trying to do was take what's already an excellent distillation of science and make it a little more user-friendly, a little more accessible. And the points here are pretty clear. Even with the framework, there's a lot of information here, a lot. There's tons of narrative information, map data, derived products. We've had a lot of people say this is great, but how can we make it more usable? We wanted to provide a real basic desktop alternatives analysis capability because you heard, I think Pete and Dave both said, your best friend's your GIS analyst. Well, unfortunately, not everybody's got one. So if you don't have one, how do you get started taking advantage of some of these really fine products that have been put together recently? This allows people to do that. And then, of course, the other thing that's been talked about here is the idea with some of these tools is to help DOI and other agencies prioritize where to do work, where to spend money, where's the best place we're going to get return on the investment. And the picture on the top right, that's basically a buddy of mine. It's completely staged. I know you would never believe that. But point being that, you know, everybody's got to make a decision at some point, no matter how much information you've got and how good it is. And then the bottom picture is just sort of a metaphor for my life. And very often we get hung up with trying to put too much onto our cart and get a little bit bogged down. So the benefits of putting together this we're calling it the CNR Tool. It's kind of a lame name, but that's what we got for now. It brings together a whole lot of information. It's all of the topics that you've seen treated earlier today. And again, it makes a lot of complex information available to non-GIS analysts in a we think it's pretty user-friendly. I'm sure some people might not say that. And it provides for reporting. This is important because you can use this kind of a tool to generate a report that if you take it through a workflow, you could use it for a specific task. We're thinking in the future, not with this one specifically, but for things like NEPA planning, putting together NEPA documents. And another important thing that we're doing here is making the data that go into the tool and into the products that come out the other side of the tool, reports, all available on one site and all of the metadata available for the data that are used. So the point is, one thing that happens often, you put together a series of maps and people say, what version of the core areas is that? I think the governor put out a new version. Do we know that's the right one? And trying to keep these things current, updated, and automatically using the best available data is one of our goals. The components, we'll talk just a little bit about the tool, how it works. Basically, there are 3 different kinds of layers. We thought, what do you want to know if you're making a decision using some of the science framework? Well, we took we're calling them the analysis layers. These are the data layers and derived products in mostly from Chambers et al. 2017, the document. We worked with Leaf and our friends with Fish to get conservation efforts database information in here. We're still working on the details of how best to serve that and so on, but this has got a version of it in here so people can see what it looks like. So that tells us where the conservation projects are on the ground. The last thing is this idea of summarization layers. These are the cookie cutters that you can drive through these other layers and find out what's in the box, what's in your area of interest. Using the tool is pretty straightforward. You turn it on, it looks sort of like a lot of basic GIS interfaces you've probably seen. And part 1, we want people to be able to explore large geographic areas, look for regional differences, zoom in and out, do things like that. And then select an area of interest if that's what you want to do. You can either use some of these canned layers or you can draw your own area of interest. Or you could upload a shapefile if you're into that. Once you get your area of interest identified, hit submit, generates a handy report. So the analysis layers that we're looking at right now, a lot of these should be pretty familiar. They're coming straight out of the science framework. First and foremost, one we put in there is SageGrouse breeding habitat probabilities with R&R. And in the little example I'm going to go through here, I included maybe a couple of others. Surface Management Agency, always a good thing to know who controls the surface where you're wanting to put a project on the ground. And you can see the rest of them here. The conservation layer, again, this is from Fish and Wildlife Service Conservation Efforts Database. They're trying to keep up with work going on across the West where projects are have been implemented or are being implemented. Includes a wide range of types, and in our tool here it's very simplified. We've only got a few categories. But the point is, we're trying to capture things that would be important in a decision. Things like, based on that first part, the analysis layers, those are biophysical things. The second part is where your existing conservation projects. And then areas that you might be interested in comparing some of the standardized cookie cutters we've got listed here on the left side of the slide. Ecoregions, management zones, packs, some different agency designations, or you can define your own area of interest. For each of the cookie cutter layers, you can turn on or off the different ones, click within that field office area or pack, and it'll tell you which one it is and give you the summary for it. So when you go into the tool, this is what it looks like. And on the left frame, that's where the layers are, and they're grouped under subheadings for the summarization, analysis, and then conservation efforts. And you can turn them on and off, adjust transparency, so you can look at things one on top of the other. And the idea here is, again, exploring data, getting familiar with it, learning about it, and we're trying to expose more people to the work that's already been done and give them some tools to work with the science framework. In this case, clicked on the Wyoming Basin's management zone, WAFA management zone. In the map in the middle, it's just like most of your other map services. You know, you can turn on topography or maps, zoom in and out and all that good stuff. And on the right pane, that's the, should be now familiar, 3x3 matrix that has R&R and sage-grouse breeding habitat probability. And the other results for the layers that you're interested in, if you were able to scroll down that right pane, you would see the other layers that we had clicked on, what their summaries were for the Wyoming Basin's management zone. So that's one thing you can do. Explore, poke around, look at regional differences, do sort of broad scale assessment. The other thing that we decided collectively, it wouldn't be very good if you couldn't do this, is to look at more specific areas and importantly, let users define their own areas. And the idea here is somebody's sitting in a field office in the middle of nowhere and they're trying to figure out if it's worth it to do alternatives analysis. They don't know whether to hire a consultant or not. Well, you could do a little bit towards that with something like this. You want to try to lay out a right-of-way or so on, you can look at different positions and see what the results are. In this case, we're near Lander, central Wyoming, for most of you, if you hadn't been there. The Y intersection, those roads, that's where Lander is, to give you a sense. And in this case, we're just going to look at a few things. So we turned on our sage-grouse habitat and R&R. We might want to know something about who owns the land, who controls the surface. In this case, purple's private, that orange is BIA, blue state, tan, BLM, and there's a little blob of gray in there. I think that's DOD. Anyway, so you got a pretty diverse land ownership pattern here. And then let's say we want to look also at our conservation projects. These polygons that are showing up, purple, I believe, are conservation easements, the polys with the dots. And then I think there's a few orange ones in there. Those are restoration projects. So you can see that in the vicinity of Lander, there's a good bit going on, according to the Conservation Efforts database. And we might want to experiment with where we want to site a new project, whether it's a treatment or trying to get an easement in place. So I drew a little box down here, a little polygon that's trying to connect a couple of existing easements with the restoration area. This is all pretend. There's nothing real about it other than just a demonstration. So once you draw that, you hit the submit button and it generates this report. You get a report, looks something like this. And keep in mind, this is a draft format, but the point is all the data and narrative content that's part of the science framework can be pulled into the system that's behind this, and you can incorporate it into your report based on your area of interest. So that's what we were looking at to start with, and there's our polygon. In this case, we're looking at the R&R categories. And it tells us a little bit about what was summarized in terms of the layers. We had sage-grouse, and I had in there apparently invasive grasses, percent cheatgrass in this case, surface management agency, sagebrush and conifer cover, and then the conservation efforts layer. This is pulling from the report itself, some of the information on the matrix, just giving people some background. And importantly, there's a link here to the report as part of the science-based catalog. That's where it's pulling from. And as part of the report, it's giving us a little summary about our area in the matrix. You can see the numbers in there, maybe. it's summarizing for us the different acreages and percent of the area we selected that are in those different categories. So you could look at this and trade it off amongst different sites, for example. And it's got a little narrative in here about what those values mean, low, moderate, high. And then for the other layers we've got, it's just sort of a simple description of what the layer is, the metadata, and then in this case, this is cheatgrass cover, and most of it's less than 2%. Surface Management Agency, it's telling us it looks like, you know, BLM, private, and state. BLM being the dominant agency controlling the surface. Most of this area has sagebrush dominated cover type. So that's sort of the quickie graphs and report part. And then here are the metadata. So for each of those layers, there's a summary metadata and a link to the actual data source. And the idea here is to be able to generate a report based on an area of interest, churn out some graphs and maps, and then refer people to the authoritative data source. So that you could do this, hand it to somebody, and nobody's confused about what just happened and how it happened. And if you think about it, getting back to the people part, that's really what it's about. You get people to agree on what the information sources are, how we're going to analyze things, and these tools become a lot more powerful. So I got the very fuzzy deadline there of spring 2018. That's when we're going to be releasing the public version of this. We're going to have some more refining on the reports. We're looking at doing this for some other reasons. USGS is looking at a project to help with energy siting, building off of a bunch of our own data sets plus others. We're looking at trying to help with NEPA planning, again, coming up with standard ways of doing like an analysis of the management situation, things like that. And trying to get people to think about using common data sources. And again, the bottom line is the real opportunity is folks working together, the land managers, operators, scientists, and technologists, to build stuff that works, because the more energy that goes into building the right tool, the more likely it's going to be used and useful. That's it. Yes, sir, in the back.
The conserved land layers, you're showing the example of land, conserved land, so this is all private.
I'm sorry, I don't hear very well.
The conserved land layer, so you were showing the example of lander, and there's the conserved land, so that's all private and public sources that are protected through easements or just fee title and stuff like that? Is that, you have access to the private land data too for conservation?
What we-
Yep.
Sorry. The question was about the layers that we were showing with respect, did you say to protected lands?
Yeah, you have the conserved land, you talked about conservation easements, so you have all the
In-
private and the public protected areas?
So that's this picture right here. And what this is showing are just those polygons. Those are coming from the Conservation Efforts database. And underneath there, you can kind of see the shading. A lot of those projects are on private ground, and that's one of the things that the CED is designed to help track, and we're just pulling from that.
Okay, so I assume that the Nature Conservancy probably has, it's probably some of the properties.
I bet you're right. I bet you're right, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we don't have this is a very basic layer, so we don't have the details of whose it is or what it is and all that.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
One of the values you showed was SageGrouse, and there's other things. Do we have a value of area of important biological diversity and conservation value? That there is public databases, the Nature Conservancy contributes to all its ecoregional plan and identifies probably the most important areas for biological diversity. And I was wondering if that is something you guys accepted as a product, or was it available? I mean, sage grouse is just one species, but if you have areas with sage grouse where it's just get at that information within this study?
Right now, what you're looking at in this list are the layers that we have included, and the short answer is, yes, we could, but it's not in there now. Because the purpose, again, on this was to build awareness and usefulness for the science framework. But you're talking about if you wanted to include other things, yes, that can be done using the same machine that's behind this.